Everybody wants justice, right up until the moment it shows up at their own front door. We demand it in our prayers and our protests and our posts. Justice for the oppressed, justice for the victim, justice for the world. And in most cases, the cry is good and right, and it bends towards solutions that only God can ultimately deliver. But if we slow down and listen to ourselves, most of us will notice something uncomfortable, which is that when we say the word justice, we almost always mean justice for somebody else, justice for them. Mercy is the thing we reserve for ourselves. Jesus saw this tendency in the human heart, and instead of shaming us for it, he told a story about it. I want to walk through that story with you, and then I want to tell you about a bishop and a pair of silver candlesticks, because by the end of this teaching, I think you'll see why the cross is the one place where the thing we want for others and the thing we want for ourselves finally stop fighting against each other. In Luke chapter 18, Jesus tells a parable. It's aimed, Luke says, at people who trusted in themselves that they were righteous and treated others with contempt. Two men go up to the temple to pray. One is a Pharisee, a respected and observant religious man. The other is a tax collector. And we should be clear about what that meant in first century Palestine. This was not an awkward accountant. This was a man who had partnered with the occupying, oppressive Roman Empire to extort his own neighbors, and he got rich doing it. A collaborator, a predator with a spreadsheet. The Pharisee stands up and prays, and the prayer is mostly an inventory of his own goodness and a monument to himself. He thanks God that he is not like other men, not greedy, not unjust, and especially not like, in his words, this tax collector. He fasts twice a week. He tithes. He has the receipts, and he's happy to read them aloud in front of everyone. Meanwhile, the tax collector is standing far off. He will not even lift his eyes toward God. He beats his chest and says 7 of the most important words in the entire Bible. God, be merciful to me, the sinner. It's notable that he says the sinner, not a sinner. The definite article is there in the Greek, indicating that unlike the Pharisees nearby, the problem with the world was not the evil he noticed in other people, but the evil he felt in his own heart. And Jesus ends the story with a verdict that would have landed like a brick. He says, I tell you, this man went down to his house justified rather than the other. Here's the breakdown of what's happening here. The Pharisee wants justice in the cleanest sense of that word. He has kept the law. He has earned his standing. He deserves what he's asking for, or at least he thinks he does. And what he does not want, and what he does not believe he needs, is mercy. The tax collector knows better. He has nothing to put on the table except his need. So he asks for the one thing the religious man would have never thought to ask for, and he is the one who walks home right with God. This is not a sentimental little story about humility being nicer than pride. It's a diagnostic. Jesus is telling us that the people who most loudly demand strict justice are very often the people who have not yet reckoned honestly with themselves. They're measuring everyone else by the law and measuring themselves by their good intentions. They see the splinter in the neighbor's eye with great clarity and somehow miss the log in their own. They've never prayed the tax collector's prayer because they've never believed they were the kind of person who needed to. Now I want to tell you about a bishop. In Victor Hugo's Les Misérables, a man named Jean Valjean has just been released after 19 years of prison and hard labor. He's starving and exhausted and turned away by every innkeeper in town. Finally, an old bishop named Myriel takes him in, feeds him at his own table, and gives him a bed to sleep in. And in the middle of the night, Valjean steals the bishop's silver and runs. The police catch him on the road and drag him back, fully expecting the old man to identify the silver, press charges, and send this ex-convict away for the rest of his life. What happens instead is one of the most arresting scenes in modern literature and film. The bishop looks at Valjean, and in front of the police, he tells them he gave the man the silver. And then he does something stranger still. He walks to the mantel, takes down 2 silver candlesticks, and brings them over, and he gently scolds Valjean for forgetting to take them too. The police have no case. They let him go. And before Valjean leaves, the bishop says this to him: "Jean Valjean, my brother, you no longer belong to evil, but to good. It is your soul that I buy from you. I withdraw it from black thoughts and the spirit of perdition, and I give it to God." But there's one thing the bishop does not do. He does not pretend the theft never happened. He does not blow it off or rename it or call it a misunderstanding. He names it for exactly what it was. He calls Valjean by name. He calls the silver by its worth, and he calls the act by its true nature. And then he absorbs the entire loss into himself and gives a demoralized criminal his life back. The cost of the crime does not evaporate into thin air. It gets transferred. It moves off of Valjean and onto the bishop. Mercy in that scene is not the opposite of justice. Mercy is justice that someone else has agreed to carry. And that is the story of the cross, which is exactly why Hugo's scene feels so true that it almost hurts to watch. Pastor Fleming Rutledge, in her book, The Crucifixion, has spent chapters insisting that we cannot soften the reality of God's judgment against evil, that any gospel that goes soft there is no gospel at all. And then she turns a corner that separates Christianity from every other religion and moral philosophy. She writes this: "The Old Testament God is the one who has come down from his throne on high into the world of sinful human flesh, and of his own free will and decision has come under his own judgment in order to deliver us from everlasting condemnation and bring us into eternal life. He has not required human sacrifice. He has himself become the human sacrifice. He has not turned us over and forsaken us. He was himself turned over and forsaken." That is what the bishop's candlesticks were always pointing toward. That is why the predatory tax collector walks home justified, while the careful religious man does not. Centuries before either story, Isaiah had already put it plainly. Surely he, Jesus the suffering servant, has borne our griefs and carried our sorrows. In Jesus, the judge sets aside the gavel, steps down off the bench, walks around the table to our side, and pays the penalty himself. So let me bring this back to you, because the question Jesus is really asking is not whether you want justice in the abstract. Of course you do. The question is whether you are willing to be on the receiving end of what justice would actually require from you, or whether you would rather be rescued by mercy. Psalm 130 asks it starkly: "If you, O Lord, should mark iniquities, O Lord, who could stand?" And then the psalmist answers himself in the very next breath: "But with you there is forgiveness." Here's the good news. If your heart is in a place to receive it today, the King, who sees everything you've ever done and everything you've ever left undone, is not keeping a ledger on you. He's holding the candlesticks, and he's eager to put them in your hands. He's calling you by name. He's telling you that the weight of your wrong has already been carried and paid in full by another. The only thing left to decide is what you will do with that.